This is the Jenni Hogan Show. Let's get this party started.
Hi everyone, I'm Jenni Hogan. Thanks for joining me for this podcast called Brilliant Brains and Next Big Thing. Today we have something we've never, ever had before on a podcast. It is a guest that's also producing. Do you like how I say it?
Yeah, no, I feel very, objectified. What is the pay, by the way, for producing
You're
the
right.
podcast?
It's about the same as being a guest.
Okay.
And I'll give you a raise on that right now.
A big hug from Jenni Hogan?
Right? Hugs are cool.
That is something that a lot of people would pay money for, though, so I do feel like there's some value to that.
Done. You did get a hug when you walked in. I'm a hugger. Did you notice that?
I did. I appreciated it.
So for all of you listening and still don't know who my producer and guest is, this is Luke Burbank. He is my podcast idol. Did you know that?
I didn't. That's very flattering to hear.
He has a podcast, TBTL. It stands for Too Beautiful to Live. You can also hear him on the NPR quiz show called Wait, Don't Tell Me. He's a contributor on CBS Sunday mornings, and he is about to marry the love of his life. Thank you so much for being here today.
I am really happy to be here, Jenni. Thanks for having me.
And producing as well. I mean, I'm still
Well, just so people know,
impressed.
I mean, we're recording this in a studio that I often use to do my little podcast. So,
so this is like your home.
yeah, I mean, and it involves all of turning a couple of little buttons on so that we can record it. So
I'm in your home interviewing you.
Mm-hmm.
This is pretty cool. It's like turning the mirror back.
yes, it's very meta.
Okay, so no interviewing me.
Okay,
right? 'Cause
that would be
that's how
hard for me.
you're-
That is actually, you know what? That is difficult for me when
Really?
I'm a guest on other people's shows because between the podcast that I do and I do a radio show as well, I'm very used to being the person who's doing the interviewing. It's hard for me sometimes to transition into the role of being the guest. So if at any point
it turns.
you feel like I'm trying to host your show for you, you just, I don't know, give me a look.
Okay. I got long arms. I was a rower.
Yeah, you're a tall drink of water.
We're about 6 feet apart, so
Yeah.
I can just...
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'll take
Just
over.
let me know.
So it's called Next Big Thing. So your next big thing is, I believe you're on the forefront of what's next in digital media. And so I'm going to be picking your brain a little bit about that. But before we do that, I want to get you warmed up like you're not used to having a microphone in your face or anything. But it's a segment I call Jenni's Gems. And it's all about things that have hit me this week that have inspired me or just something I've learned that I want to share and help the audience out with. So you're going to be a part of this. I went to a wedding in Charleston.
South Carolina.
Yes, last week. And I thought my gems this week could be all about that. Things I learned from the Southern culture. Did you know, this is the first one, the tea comes sweet to you. You have to ask for it not to be sweet. And I thought that was very sweet.
So if you order tea, like sort of cold tea in the South,
Yes.
they assume it's sweet tea. You have to opt out of the sweetening.
And I think life should be like that. I think you should just add sweetness without being asked for it. What do you think?
I think that figuratively that's a good idea. I think in a literal way, the level of diabetes in the South, which is already probably off the charts, would only increase. I think anything that causes people in the South to eat more unhealthily is a bad idea. But I like it as a concept,
As a
in terms of
concept.
like our interactions, our friendship,
Yes,
things like
always
that.
be sweet.
Yes, I'm into that.
Love it. So then the next thing was the saying, well, bless her heart. So apparently you can say anything you want about someone. You could be like, they just insulted my kid or they're not a nice person, but bless her heart.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's nice.
Yeah.
So
That's kind of a cop-out, I think. It's folksy. And what's the Aussie sort of equivalent of that? Like, is there a thing
question. Here you
that...
go. Now you're turning us, asking the questions back. That's what you're doing, right?
Well, I'm curious. I'm curious because, that is definitely...
It's like, she'll be right, mate. This person just drove over my foot.
Mm-hmm.
She'll be right. And then you're all friends again.
Really?
Yeah.
And that's should be all right? Is that what you were saying?
She'll be
she'll
right.
Be all right.
She'll be right, mate. Say it.
She'll be right, mate.
Yes, you're friends with everyone.
My daughter is named for a city in Australia.
What is it?
Her name's Adelaide.
That's where I'm from.
Really?
Did you know that it was a city when you named her that? Or
Well, her mom named her that. It was her mom's idea, I should say.
Yeah.
But I don't think I knew.
have you been there?
I haven't been there.
You have to go. Okay, so my mom is retired, but she's a tour guide, a city tour guide, so she could meet you off the plane, take you around.
All right, I'm
Adelaide. So we named our daughter Siena because of the city in Italy. And so we think we have to go visit the city Siena.
Maybe I'll have to take my kid. There's an Adelaide apartment building in the U District that has on the door, it says the Adelaide Apartments, and I've been taking my kid there and taking her picture intermittently throughout her childhood.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
She's not a child anymore. She's 19 now. But
19? You have a 19-year-old?
Yeah. I was 17 when she was born.
Wow.
Well, like I say, I felt like it was time.
19-year-old.
You know, you just get to a point where you've done the whole junior year of high school thing. You're just ready, you know. That's a joke in America, by the way.
Oh, my goodness.
That's called sarcasm.
I'm trying to do the math, and, you know, I could have a 19-year-old. Like, just staring at you with a blank face right now. Wow.
Yeah.
That's adult.
Yeah. Yeah. She's a freshman in college, but my point is
you
just
that she's... You got to be proud in college.
I'm super proud of her. You know what? Well, later on, when I do my gem at some point? Do I have a gem?
You do. What is your gem?
Here's my gem. So I'm getting married on Saturday, and it's going to be a really small affair. It's just pretty much our families. And so my daughter is basically DJing the wedding because she's really, really dialed in on music. Like, she is so great at finding kind of obscure stuff that nobody's heard, or even just like picking the best of like the oldies, whether it's Otis Redding or Stevie Wonder or whatever. And she's just like obsessed with music. And I'm also very interested in music, and so this is a thing we've always kind of bonded over.
Yeah.
And it's really fun because she's been emailing me all week, like, okay, this is, you know, these are some of the artists I'm thinking of, and like we've been collaborating on it. And I said to her in an email today, I was like, you know, I really appreciate you doing this. I was like, you're the only person that I trust with this, because she's a total chip off the old block. Like, what I would like to be the one picking all the music, but I'm too busy getting ready for the wedding.
It's an important role. It sets your whole theme.
Yeah.
And if you think of the wedding, how many hours from start to finish? It's 2 to 3 hours once you're at.
Well, the ceremony will be very short, but the whole thing is like going to be an entire day long. There's like the ceremony, there's a reception afterwards. We're going down to this beach house for like another thing, and there's going to be music underneath kind of all of it. But it was cool because, like, how old's your kid?
3 next weekend.
It's really interesting. This is the first time. Oh, happy birthday!
Dang, on your wedding weekend.
Is it the 18th?
The 20th. Well, it's actually the Monday, so.
Because the 18th is the anniversary of Mount St. Helens erupting. I learned when
you booked your wedding.
Yeah. It's auspicious. I was going to say, this is the first time in my life, and you may experience this, you will experience this when your kid gets older at some point, but this is probably the first time in my life where there's been a thing where it's like, my kid is doing something for me that like I couldn't do or I don't have the time to do. That's actually like a huge benefit to my life. I've been taking care of her ass for 19 years.
Can you say that word on podcast?
It's your show.
Okay.
You could always bleep it out later.
You're right. You're the producer.
Have one of your minions bleep it out. There's no FCC. I don't know. I don't know what your personal taste is, but I think this is a thing that happens as you get older. If you have grown kids, there's a point at which you start to rely on them to a degree. Like, they've been relying on you really intensely.
Yes.
And my daughter continues to rely on me for most things, but this is a way in which I'm relying on her, and it's a weird,
That's really cool.
It's a weird and exciting thing to just be like, oh, my kid has this handled. Like, the whole musical flow of the wedding is dependent on my 19-year-old Western Washington student daughter to come up with it in her dorm this week.
And she has. It doesn't even sound like she's got any hesitation.
No, I think she's psyched to do it. And anyway, so that's my gem for the week. It's really fun to like see your kids as adults. It's hard, but it's also kind of fun to see them as adults.
To know we're going through that 2 to 3 phase. I don't know if you remember that phase.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. It's actually, though, the only thing that's worse is the teenager years.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to put your number on speed dial.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like you've done good.
Well, who knows? I mean, I thought when I was a kid that my parents had some sort of like owner's manual.
Yeah.
They would go sit in bed and read like, well, here's what you do next. And it turns out they don't have one of those.
Well, isn't it interesting? Every day I realize, like, I want to call my parents and say thank you, because you start to realize what they went through. I'm like, oh my goodness. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
When I was trying to leave the house in a short skirt, my dad said no. I mean, it's a battle, and you're not a friend, but you want to be a friend. I mean, it's really.
And on you, a short skirt, that would have been like a prairie
really
dress, a prairie dress on somebody else.
I'm 6 feet tall, and those dresses that they make just look like T-shirts. So yeah, we have to put the dress and the jeans underneath. My third gem was giving gifts at weddings. So the gift that I gave my friend was a website with her new name, because women, we have to change our name. And I'm so into that and branding, and I don't know if it was a good gift or not from their point of view. I thought it was really cool.
That's really thoughtful. So you went and you reserved the URL.
Not only reserved, this name of hers is a very common name. I had to go and call the person that owned it and try and negotiate to get it. Yeah, they started off really high, and then I think once they spoke to me and realized I wasn't a company, I'm not trying to make money, I was like, look, we're just pulling together some money to try and get this bride her name. We finally got a price, and I got it.
That is really thoughtful. I mean, that's incredibly thoughtful.
See, I thought that was a good gift. It's just different, right?
Absolutely. No, I mean, I would have never occurred to me.
Is your wife to be, do you have her URL? Maybe you should surprise her with it.
That's actually not a bad idea. She is actually taking on my last name, which is something that I never thought I cared about. I've actually been married previously.
Interesting. Okay.
And my ex-wife didn't take on, it wasn't my baby mama, it was a different person, didn't take on my last name. And at that time, it didn't occur to me one way or the other, like if I cared or not. But I have to say that this time around, the fact that my betrothed is going to actually have my last name, I know all of the arguments as to why it's sort of outdated and we shouldn't have to do it, and why isn't it the man who changes his name, or why don't you combine the names? Those are all like totally reasonable arguments. I can't make a good 2013 argument for a woman changing her last name to her husband's name, other than I have to say it's one of the things that I'm most delighted by in terms of the notion of me and her getting married.
It means a lot to the guy, like for the woman to say, yeah. I mean, it's a pain to change your name. I remember after our wedding, and I had to change everything to Hogan, and the driver's license, and the banks, and then.
What can I ask? What was your maiden name?
Vesnaver. Okay.
How German?
Is Italy,
that German?
Northern Italy. It's Vesnavik was a little town.
Okay, because I've been to Northern Italy, and Northern Italy has got a lot of sort of a German influence by way of Switzerland, right?
Yes.
I was in Venice, and all of the program, like half the TV channels were in German, and I guess that's because of the proximity to Switzerland.
Don't you think it's a good like morning radio show name, like Jenni Vesnaver, and you're like, get up.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I'm awake.
Yeah, no,
what do you want
me
me to do now?
I would definitely
Hogan's
get
more
it.
relaxing.
Yeah, but see, interestingly enough, is your husband Australian?
No, but when I met him in the bar and he said his last name and I knew I wanted to be in TV, what a good name.
Exactly. And it's also
Jenni Hogan.
And think about it. Like Paul Hogan, very famous
very
Aussie here in the States, so it may.
No, he scored with his last name. So then I scored. But I do love my dad's last name too, Vesnaver, and I was thinking about putting it as my middle name to sort of keep it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, it is, as a woman, you are changing your brand. For however many years, I'm Jenni Vesnaver. You Google me, that's what it is. My rowing at UW days, that's who I was. Then you change your name and you have a clean start online, which I know is getting bigger and bigger and more important now. So that's a huge thing for her to take your name. I like it. I would do it.
Are you sort of an old-fashioned gal, though, do you think? I mean, you're very plugged into the digital world.
Yes, and I'm all about women working and doing their thing, but no, open that door for me. Buy me dinner, yes. Yeah, I'll take your name into that.
Well, I can just speak from my experience, but it is, I think, a very, my girlfriend sent me an email. My fiance sent me an email.
She's going to be your wife? My
wife in like 6 days.
Yeah.
And she sent me an email that said, like, talking about something we were going to do, and she goes, like, and she was joking, but she said, like, that's the Burbank way or something. Like, we were on Team Burbank.
We say Team Hogan all the time.
And I was just like, oh, that's awesome. Like, I was really, really excited about it. So that may not be the thing for everybody, of course, but I'm that's my second gem of the week, Hogan.
You've now given me a few gems. We've got, the gem is like taking over here.
Yeah.
So my guest this week is Luke Burbank. He is my podcast idol with TBTL, which stands for Too Beautiful to Live. Let's talk a little bit about podcasting. What do you think? Am I doing okay?
I think you're doing great. Here's what I think you're doing that's smart.
Yes.
You have a plan. You're working off of a rundown, right? That's a big
So for everyone listening, I sort of sat him down and said, here's what we're going to do today. Couldn't go through the gems.
But see, this is an important thing, and maybe this is because you're also a TV personality.
I'm producing a TV show here. Can you tell?
And you, I mean this though as a compliment, because one of the things about podcasting is that it's very doable now for people, right? The technology has made it really easy.
Anyone could do it, yeah.
But that doesn't mean that all the podcasts that get created are listenable. And what happens a lot is that people think that the way to do a podcast is to just get a couple of microphones and then just start gabbing. And very few people can make that compelling, week in and week out. It's really, I say the dirty little secret about podcasting is that you're basically making a radio show. And you have to sort of have a plan. You have to have a structure. So I think the way that and I've been listening to the show, I think the way that you're running this show is a really good thing, because I think, it's interesting, and people sort of know what they're going to get. And I think that's a big key for the show that I do, TBTL. It was a radio show, and we got fired. And then we basically had our last night of doing the radio show on a Friday night at this very station, because it was the night show here. And I went to the engineers from this radio station. And I said, I want to start doing this show as a podcast from my house. Do you have any gear that I can borrow? And they went and they got the stuff that was like they used to use for like remotes from the boat show or something.
Yeah. And
they brought it over to my house and they just kind of set up this funky little setup. And that was over the weekend. So for Friday, we did our last radio show. Monday at noon, we did our first podcast from the house. But we used the same intro music. We had a show sheet. We are like Adam Carolla was our first guest.
Wow.
We just totally
kept going like
our exact same show. And I think treating it like that can be a really important thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's part of why people seem to like our show to the degree that they do, because it feels like there's a plan when we're doing it.
Now, I mean, you just skipped over being fired, that word, but you said it. I mean, something good came out of that. It's like you lose your radio show, but now you have your own show. You're sitting at home.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to drive in.
Yeah.
And you obviously were passionate about the people listening enough to know that there was something that still needed to be done there.
Well, we were a kind of a middling radio show, but we were always a really popular podcast. So even when we were doing the show, we would then turn around and put it up online as a podcast. And we were getting really good podcast downloads. And at the radio station at the time, nobody seemed to recognize that was anything useful. They just wanted us to have good radio ratings. So I, at some point in my mind, transitioned from trying to do a successful radio show for them to just trying to do
a good show
and get as many people on board with the digital version of the show as possible. So then when we got fired, it was pretty funny because they
you keep saying fired and laughing. I'm like, it's so funny because that word to many people, maybe pivot. I had this with Chase Jarvis. He kept saying failing, but it always led to something good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you need to change the word from fired.
Well, I mean, the name of our show, Too Beautiful to Live, that was a reference to, so the person who is maybe the most responsible for TBTL, if not at least 50% of it, is a friend of mine named Jen Andrews. Mm-hmm. She was the person who was working at the radio station. I was in New York doing a show for NPR. I was moving back to Seattle to be closer to my kid, the wedding DJ. And Jen called me up and said, oh, hey, you're coming back to Seattle. You know what? There's this night show. They're looking for a new host. Maybe we should collaborate. And I was like, oh, that'd be great, because she and I had always wanted to work together. And we kept talking in our meetings about the show.
Yeah.
We kept saying, we're okay if this show is too beautiful to live. Like,
oh, wow. So that's how you got the name.
Yeah. Like, Jen would describe it as like a firefly that you catch and you put it in a pickle jar and it's like beautiful, but then it dies overnight because like it's too beautiful to live, right? We kept saying, we're fine with the show being too beautiful to live. Like, we don't care if the show gets canceled after a month. We just want to make a show that sounds different to us and is fun and interesting and doesn't sound like every other news-based talk show. So we were totally okay with being fired or being let go or being dishonorably discharged, whatever sort of terminology you want to use.
Interesting.
We were fine the whole time. We, like, literally night one, when we finished night one of the show, we thought, wow, well, that went further than we thought.
So I think from day one, it doesn't sound like you were doing the show to be within the rules of traditional radio. It sounds like you really wanted to do what in your heart was a great show without any rules.
Yeah, because, I mean, have you listened to regular talk radio? It's highly reductive. It's based on fake outrage. It's a whole bunch of things that are not genuine when it comes to conversation. For instance, like just the conversation you and I are having right now.
Yeah.
We couldn't do this
We could not do
on
this.
any of the existing Cairo radio shows.
On TV, no. You have to you got 30 seconds to have a conversation with someone.
Which is why, over the weekend I was talking to this guy named Mark Maron, who has a podcast called WTF. And I think it's a really great show, and it's the kind of thing. He's basically, the first part of the show is just him talking about his feelings and what's been going on in his week and his emotional state. It's so great. It could only exist, though, because of podcasting. It would never be something that could survive in, like, commercial radio.
So this is exactly why I brought you in. It's the next big thing, and that's where we're going with this, is what is the next big thing when it comes to the audio digital world? Maybe you don't know, but you are innovating. It's not getting fired, or maybe a lesson is when you innovate, you may have to be willing to get fired to create something new and great.
I definitely agree with that. I'm working on a book project right now.
Ooh.
And the sort of working title for it is Failure is an Option.
Yeah.
And it's about kind of my experiences of having these failures, these seeming failures occur, and having it usually kind of work out for something better. And I mean, I think it's very, very hard. I would say I'm not some big innovator at this point. I'm probably, funnily enough, like in the earlier days of podcasting, I was probably, one of the earlier people to the scene who had taken a radio show and made it into a podcast. Like Adam Carolla had been fired from his show and started doing a podcast, I think maybe at right around the same time. Maybe he was a month ahead of us. But at one point we were kind of early adopters to this, and it's been really good for us because we have a lot of listeners that we picked up when there was like less competition. But now, I don't know, it's like a band that's like the progressive kind of like out there band, and then 20 years later it's like there's so many more other bands that have come along and they're playing stuff that's way more wild and out there. So I don't know if we're on the cutting edge of any kind of podcast thing anymore. But it's definitely, I think, where spoken word entertainment is going in terms of like radio stuff. Right now, I think the main impediment is just there are still a lot of people that don't exactly know what a podcast is, how podcasts operate. The cars aren't set up for it yet, although that's changing more and more. Once you just can get in your car and you can just press a button and it brings on this show or it brings on my show or something else, and it's as easy as turning on your radio, then I think terrestrial radio is through.
Well, and I think the word podcast is probably is putting up some limitations too, because I think it is a show. A podcast is what people know it as now, and it's an easy way to say, hey, listen to my podcast. But really, it is a show. Why couldn't your show be the first thing people tune into the radio? Couldn't it be on a cable network if you have video as well? It's just the platform and name right now is podcast. Yeah,
if you go to our website, which is tbtl.net, it says TBTL, and then underneath it says a radio show on your computer.
Yes,
or that's really all it is.
Your phone now.
Yeah,
it's the second screen.
Yeah,
sneaky.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that is so clearly superior to. And I'm not saying that all radio shows are necessarily bad. The current existing terrestrial radio shows, but right now, what the terrestrial radio stations have going for them is that they own the towers. Like they currently own the still sort of easiest way for people to get this spoken word content. So for now, there's an advantage in that. Because you get in your car, even I do this. Like I get in my car and
you press the radio.
And if I didn't remember to load this podcast into my phone, or I'm driving and it's like kind of scrolling through it as a hassle. But as soon as you get rid of those impediments, as soon as it's really simple, it's sort of like once you have a DVR, you will never watch normal TV again, because it's just, who would watch a show they don't want to watch because it's what's on, as opposed to like all the stuff that's in your DVR now. Podcasting is just that.
And it's opened up the field to anyone to create it, whereas with the radio stations you needed to be part of the tower.
Yeah.
Now you can be in your garage and have your microphone at home and create a show, which has a lot of competition, but comes down to what you said. If it's produced well, then that might stand apart.
Mm-hmm. I definitely think that the cream sort of has a way of rising to the top.
I made the iTunes something page.
I
That
heard
was
about
really
this.
Cool.
I heard about this. That was really cool. Congratulations. And it was
Thanks.
like early on in
Yeah.
your time of doing this.
So I don't know. There was a fluke of. I thought maybe James here like photoshopped it in, and it was a trick on my computer or something like that. But when you walked past my desk and you said you saw it, I was like, So thank you for being supportive.
Of course.
And excited that we're getting into this. So my guest this week, Luke Burbank with TBTL. I'm trying to think if the next big thing, TNBT. Look at you looking at the clock, being a good producer. He's also producing this as well as being the guest today. How did you meet your wife that you're getting married to this weekend?
We met at a wedding.
What was the song? Do you remember the song when you first saw her?
Well, it was before the wedding, actually. And what happened was I was there not that long after a breakup, and my date was my kid. And I was actually performing the wedding, so I was officiating it for some friends. And this other friend of mine brought this person, my now soon-to-be wife, brought her kind of as his date, but they had been friends for a long time.
What's her name? I'm just
Her
calling
name's
her the
Carrie.
Carrie, thank you.
They'd come kind of as like friends, right? And so I saw her right away, and I was like, what's that lady's story, you know? And so then throughout the wedding reception, I was kind of doing that thing where I was trying to, in whatever way I could, kind of like impress her, which is so pathetic. But you know, when you sort of take a shine to a person, and you're like hyper aware.
You're officiating the wedding. I do, but you still have your eye on this woman in the crowd.
Right. Yeah. And you're kind of like, you're like really keenly aware of where they are in the room throughout the event. So you're just like hoping that you're like, it's your good side that they're looking at, or, you know.
What side's your good side?
I don't have one.
Okay. Mine's my left if we ever have to take a picture, by the way.
Girls know that. And I guess because you have been in TV too, it's like, my fiance is like, and my daughter too, they're all like, oh, no, not that angle. Then like, we have to redo the whole thing so it can be from the good side.
But do you have photos you love?
I don't have very many. I'm very unphotogenic.
No, that's because you don't know your side. If you knew your side, you would love every photo. Well, I got to get you and my husband doing the poses because he's the same.
Really?
Yes. I keep telling him we have to go through some photos and work out what side, and he doesn't want to do it.
Whatever side de-accentuates my double chin is the side that I need to be. Maybe the person is up on a platform and we're looking up at it to take the picture. All photos are me. So she saw your good side, is what we're saying. Well, I don't know, actually, to be honest with you. I'm not sure if I made an impression on her or not. But
really?
But she Facebook friended me that week.
Okay.
And that was really helpful because I didn't remember what her name was. And I didn't know her last name. The only way I was going to get her information would have been to ask my buddy who brought her to the wedding. And I felt like that was going to be awkward.
Yes.
Because they were friends, but she's a foxy lady. And I would imagine that he wouldn't have been opposed to, like, you know, if she was like, hey, let's go on a date.
Yeah, the sort of rules with friends, like if they bring a friend to a wedding,
Right. So I didn't really, I was like, I guess I'll never know how to contact this girl because the person who knows her name is a person who probably would be kind of like, not that interested in maybe giving me the number. So I then when she Facebook messaged me, I was like, oh, is that person from the wedding? And then it was. And I looked at her Facebook page, and she had gotten a haircut, and she had written on the page like, oh, great, I got this. She didn't like the haircut. She was like, I got this dorky new haircut right in time for being single and for summer. And I was like, there's my in. She's single. And so I sent her a message and was like, hey, you know, it was nice meeting you, and back and forth. And I said, do you want to grab a beer sometime? And she said, sure. And she says now that she thought like I meant in sometime in the next 6 months. And I was like, how's Friday?
You're like, I'm not letting this one go.
Really?
Yeah.
And truly. And that was sort of it.
So you went, had beer?
We didn't even have a beer. I don't really drink beer, but...
How bad a beer is.
I meant that kind of figuratively. Well, actually, you know, it's funny. I thought long and hard. I don't know how things sort of evolved with you and your husband, but I actually thought extensively about the type of drink to suggest. I didn't want to say coffee because coffee sounded really platonic, but I didn't want to say cocktails because that sounded overly kind of sensual. So beer seemed like the kind of good middle ground. Like beer is like cash, but it is alcohol. So it's like this.
You're like gonna have fun.
This is gonna be fun, but low pressure. But this is not business.
And it's one beer. So it's not like I'm trying to.
All this stuff.
Yeah.
But
good move.
But then I did try.
What happened then?
Well, she was receptive to the whole notion.
How long ago was this?
Year and a half.
Good.
2 years.
I have this thing, like if you're not going to ask the woman to marry you within a year to 2 years, let us go find the one.
Right. Yeah. That's definitely the kind of there's an amount of time that you can be engaged where it really seems to kind of let the air out of the balloon.
Yes. And you sometimes guys too are happy they've got you. You just sort of got to prod them a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let them know.
Yeah. Well,
did you need prodding, or were you just?
I didn't need that much prodding. No, I was psyched. I was a little, I'd been married before. I'd been engaged previously, so it's a little gun shy.
Yeah.
Because I've definitely, had my share of kind of serious relationships. But no, I was pretty sure. Actually, we went on a trip together pretty shortly after we started dating, and I said to her, like, one day, I was like, "Hey, do you think we're going to get married?" I was kind of joking, but kind of not joking, but I was talking about it very casually, and she said, "Yeah, I think so." And now she's explained to me that, like, I mean, she had also dated people, and,
You just know.
She was, like, not the kind of gal who, like, when we had a bridal magazine in high school and was like, "Someday my prince will come," because she had some pretty decent princes, which she never lets me forget. She's friends with all these people she dated, and all of them. It's a couple guys, and they're really
Good
nice,
look,
like
yeah.
really accomplished, really good, like guys who have done well for themselves.
She's yours though. She's Team Burbank this weekend.
She's Team Burbank, but I didn't realize what a big deal it was when she was like, "Yeah," because that wasn't her style, basically. You know what I mean? That was like a pretty big deal for her. So
nice. Have you seen her dress?
No, I haven't seen the dress she's going to wear because
Good.
It's supposed to be a surprise.
You guys are doing traditional.
Well, I saw other dresses. Here's what happened.
Yeah.
I saw other dresses. We went to the place. She was trying some of them on. And I think it became clear to her pretty quickly into it that the kinds of dresses I liked weren't the kinds that she liked. And she had her heart set on not a specific dress, but a style of dress. And I think of it, she realized, like, it's not helping having him here because And I just said to her, "It's your dress. You're going to wear it. I want it to be whatever you want it to be. I'm going to be perfectly happy."
Are you a crier at weddings? What do you think is going to happen when you see her coming down?
I cried. I was in Portland this weekend, and I cried during the on-demand preview for the movie Chasing Mavericks. Okay, which is like about surfing. So yes, I think
You're a crier.
I'm a big crier.
Oh,
I'm not a crier.
So cool.
Like I don't go like. I'm like a tearer upper. Like water in the eye. That's what I do.
This is going to be amazing, and you've got the songs. Your daughter's going to be DJing. DJ Burbank. Like, have we given her a name?
That sounds a little. I don't know. I don't want to. I still want her to be college student Burbank for the time being.
All right, we'll keep it that one. So that is the podcast. The time is up with you. Thanks so much. That time flew by the way.
Were we supposed to be recording this?
Oh, you weren't recording it? We can start again. I got so much more to ask you.
I didn't say I was a good producer.
So he is producing as well as being a guest. Any last minute tips for me on the podcast realm?
I would say being authentic is always the way to go. You know what I mean? Like, I think that, I know I just said, have a rundown and sound like you know what you're doing. And I think that's all good stuff. But I think within that, like, I think authenticity really goes a long way. And authenticity is the thing that podcasts can provide that, as we were saying, a lot of the other media, it's difficult to have the time to do that. So yes. I would say, like, and I haven't heard every show you've done, but I would say that if you come in and one day your gem is, maybe a little tarnished.
Yes.
That's okay too. Okay. I think that's really compelling to people. And
that's what I'm working on too, is letting more out, because as a TV personality, a journalist, you're trained not to put your opinion on.
Yeah.
And so that's been hard for me to push out my stories and show those cracks as well. But I like, you're real. Everyone's real. So.
And you know what's amazing is, and I've learned this a lot on the shows that I've done, is that people are usually pretty cool about it. Like, everybody has had problems. And whereas there might be this thought, like I had, like, oh, well, if I tell them that I'm, doing a bad show today because I'm massively hungover, or if I'm feeling sad about something.
Yeah.
I mean, not like the show is a total confession, but it's like people are usually really receptive to that. And they actually, I think it bonds them to you a lot more as, like, the listeners to, because shows where people sound kind of,
happy all the time.
Like everything's awesome. There are a lot of those things out there, but I think shows where people are really real with kind of what's going on with them, I think those are more compelling to people. So I would just say, don't be afraid to be yourself.
Great. Great advice. Thank you so much. And if there is one thing the listeners can do for you right now to make you smile, what would that be?
Maybe follow me on Twitter, I guess.
Oh, yeah. So what's your Twitter handle?
It's just my name, Luke Burbank.
Luke.
I'm very jealous of you, LukeBurbank.
Okay.
I'm jealous because you're Twitter verified.
I freaked out when I got that blue tick. It's amazing. You will get it, and you have to call me because I know exactly how you feel.
Well,
You're not blue ticked yet?
I'm not. And for people that don't know, for people who have lives and don't know what we're talking about, that's this you see a little check mark by someone's name, and it's like you're Twitter verified, and it's this
It's
weird.
really nothing.
It's nothing,
like...
but if you're somebody who is on Twitter a lot, that's like the mark of legitimacy on Twitter. And this process by which you get verified is totally unknowable.
No one knows that. Like, I think I wrote to them and said, like, a year and a half before I got it, and said that I needed one, and they were like, "Who are you?" And nothing happened. And then
who did you email? Because I need to get that email address from you.
It was like a little form or something. And then my friend was like, I know the head person at Twitter or something. And he called him and they said, there's no one trying to be here. No one's going to try and pretend they heard. No. So I thought I was done. And then one day people started tweeting, oh my gosh, where'd that blue tick come from? So I don't know if it goes through a long process or they just wake up and want to have fun with someone. And
it's like a little, again, in the Twitter world, which I will admit to any of the people listening to this who aren't on Twitter, is a pretty pathetic world to be as excited about as I am. If they were to do that,
I love my Twitter.
You want to? Can I just say? I know we're going over your time, but this is the other beauty of podcasts. It doesn't matter, right?
It doesn't matter.
It could be like extra long time.
Yeah.
I years ago I was at this sort of I guess you could say like conference in Napa. It was a bunch of rich people. I worked for NPR at the time, and what they would do is they would bring the really rich donors to some super amazing getaway for a weekend.
Yeah.
And they would bring the NPR on-air people, some of them, to sort of schmooze. And there were all these little sort of breakout sessions. And one of them was with this guy named Biz Stone, who was like telling me about like what he was working on. He was like, yeah, it's just this little short kind of bursts of information. He's describing Twitter to me. He's like one of the co-founders of Twitter. And he was trying to explain Twitter to me. And we're sitting by this fire and I'm like drinking some wine and I'm thinking to myself like, oh, you poor man. This will never go anywhere.
No.
And I remember thinking to myself like, if only you were as cool as me and you had a failed radio show on NPR, if only you could be that cool. As he was explaining Twitter to me.
Oh, my goodness. You could have got the blue tick. You could have been the first one.
So nobody should ever believe any of my sort of, predictions.
Your company won't work
predictions about anything because I could not have been more wrong about that.
Yeah, Twitter's taken off. I love it. It's changed my life.
I get too obsessed with it, though. I get too obsessed with all the social media stuff. I talked to my therapist about this because
I think I'm obsessed about it, too.
You probably are.
Yeah. Everyone's like, what's your hobby? And I'm like, Twitter and social media. Like,
right, but you do the thing where like you're in your car and you like stop at the red light and you like have your phone and you're checking if anyone's like tweeting about you, and then you drive another mile and you stop and you check it again.
Or you have to write back to them because I feel rude if they haven't and they've done. Like yesterday on Mother's Day, I switched off from my daughter and husband and was like, I'm not online. 8:30 at night, like you should have seen me. I'm going through everything like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I left these people for so long. Is that normal? That's not normal?
Well, for me, the problem is that I get caught in this feedback loop where it's like I check my email, I check Twitter, I check Facebook, I check all the different places to see basically if anyone's thinking about me. And that's like, I think actually emotionally a thing that we have to sort of think about.
See, I loved checking the mailbox when I was growing up. I would run out to the mailbox because it was that feeling of, is someone going to communicate with me?
Right. But that's also a way for us to probably, like for me, that's a way for me to sort of like get a little boost of self-esteem in the moment, which is fine. But then what happens when nobody's retweeting you? Like for me, it's like what happens when this little like loop of digital feedback that makes me feel like, oh yeah, people care about me. This is good. Yeah. Like when that goes away, I would hope that I would have a better like emotional gyroscope that would just be like regulating how I feel about myself outside of like, oh, somebody thought that tweet I wrote. There's nothing worse than when you write a tweet that you think is really funny and like nobody retweets it. You're like, what?
Isn't it interesting? And then some
other ones
get tweeted like 50 times.
Yeah. So.
Very interesting. And I do love your photo.
Oh.
On Twitter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was...
Where were you looking just then?
I thought behind me there was a photo
On the wall.
I don't know
in
when
this
you
studio.
said. Yeah.
No, so go to his Twitter, twitter.com/Luke Burbank, and look at the photo. You're in a toilet.
I am
with a towel.
See, here's the thing. You got to remember that if you say in a toilet in the States, people think you're standing in a toilet. I'm in a bathroom. I'm actually not even in a bathroom. I'm in a set that's made to look like a bathroom.
Oh, okay. We get the background
There was
here.
a magazine article about me, and they built, because I do the show, I often do the podcast from my house. They thought it would be funny to build like a pretend,
you have a microphone,
bathroom, and there's like an on-air sign in the bathroom, and I'm talking into the mic.
Oh, that would be so cool if that was your place.
I could run. There's a bathroom that's connected to where I do the show. It's highly possible I could do the show from the bathroom if I wanted.
Interesting. Let me know when you do that.
Okay.
I don't know why I'd want to know.
Yeah, I don't actually think that would be very pleasant for you or the listeners, but I'll tweet at you when it's happening.
Tweet me while you're tweeting. No, this is going not in a
good
place. This is going down the toilet fast.
This is all good stuff for TBTL. This is not so good for
the next
show.
big thing.
That's right.
Is podcasting from your bathroom and being authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you gave me one other tip too, was producing and knowing what you're doing each time.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm
Sure.
excited to put these into practice and see where it goes.
I think you're probably doing a lot of them, but again, I was wrong about Twitter, so I could be wrong about this stuff too.
I love your advice. You've done very well, and I'm a big fan. And thank you very much for being part of this podcast.
Thanks, Jenni.
Yay! Bye, everyone.